podcasting would be a good option. And interestingly, it combined a skill that I didn't realize I'd been honing, which was interviewing. An interesting element of interviewing as well as podcasting. This goes into the next question, but what makes a successful one? And it is learning the art of asking better questions.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, podcaster. It's your host, Adam Adams, and we're with Ahna Fulmer today, who is a client and a friend and somebody that inspires me. And I think you'll also find yourself a little bit inspired at the end of the podcast. She's got a show, obviously, or else how could we help her? And it is called, I said it wrong earlier. I said, I don't know what I said, but it was not right. It's Imperfectly Empowered. Imperfectly Empowered. Motto. I love it. And you also are doing something new in your business. It's kind of recent and it's about waking up early and having a morning routine. I think I would like to hear a little bit about, and maybe the listener would, what's important about a morning routine and why did you pick those two things?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that's important to clarify is that waking up early is not natural for about 50% of the population. And I happen to be one of those 50%. And it was about 4 or 5 years ago in 2018, I was a busy working mom. I had 3 kids. My youngest was 1. And I was a dual certified nurse practitioner working in emergency medicine at the time. I was also the assistant medical director for 2 stroke programs that I helped create from the ground up. On top of that, we were renovating houses. We were in our second fixer-upper at that time. That was like a side hustle for my husband and I. And on top of that, I had just started a home DIY decor blog just for fun because I didn't have enough going on. But I was at that point that a lot of us reach as moms where I desperately needed time for me. I was sick of waking up every morning rushed and feeling like I was starting stressed and behind before I even got going for the day. And so I decided I was going to start an early morning routine because it was the only time I could find quiet. So I hustled to make this happen and I fought the snooze button for about 2 years and really reprogrammed my biology to fall in love with the early morning quiet. And I fell in love with it so much and realized how many other women desperately want the same thing. But when it's not natural, it's incredibly difficult. And there's no program out there teaching you how to become an early morning person, ultimately. So as a health and fitness coach, I ended up leaving bedside medicine and my online presence as a blogger actually turned into a virtual health and fitness professional, which is really neat. Now I help people prevent disease instead of treat disease, which is exciting. But what happened is I realized there was this gap for many of us as women in the health and fitness space because we go hard for 6 weeks and we transform our life for 6 weeks, but it's sort of like a Band-Aid on a gaping wound because we haven't created a habit of life change. And not that that 6 weeks wasn't important, but what we need is we need another program to partner with those fitness and nutrition programs who are able to also teach people how to create a habit to help sustain and offload some of the stress during our day so that we can really focus on nutritional changes, which is a full-time job. For any of you, Adam, you've certainly undergone a lot of health transformation. You know, I mean, tracking macros in and of itself is like a full-time job. So the bottom line is we are in the process of creating this premier virtual program for busy women to learn how to become an early morning riser, establish a routine they can sustain that starts with being, not doing. We don't get up earlier to hustle harder and do more. We're trying to press pause and actually be still and renew our hearts and minds in the calm of the quiet. And then we get a time efficient, effective workout done before our kids wake up. So that is early morning habit. If that's not cool enough, we are also an adoption fundraising program. My passion is to help women really manifest the sense that you are worth investing in because you have the power to impact the world because you've been made in the image of God. And that alone makes you enough. Finding your value not in what you say or do, but in the God that created you. And really tapping into that to manifest this idea that you have the power to change the world. The small choices that you make for yourself have a massive impact. So when women successfully complete the program on the app, my company gives them back a significant portion of the money they paid for the program to give forward to an enrolled and adopting mom who's raising funds through LifeSong for Orphans. We are also adopting, so this is another heartbeat of mine. So anyways, there's a lot going on behind the scenes over here, but Early Morning Habit, we're ready to change women's lives and bring more children home to their forever families.
I like it. I have a question on the 50%. You mentioned that there's about half of us who it's not natural for us to wake up early. It's not normal. It shouldn't be normal maybe for us to wake up early. It's not our in our body, but that we can fix it. Is that part's true, right? And you fixed it?
Yes, I'm living proof of that. Yes.
What I'm curious about is who is your perfect avatar? Is it really just the 50% that it's not natural for, or is it anybody?
It's absolutely anybody. And to be clear, an early morning routine is beneficial whether you are a man or a woman. It's just my avatar specifically for this program. We are really honing in on busy women. And what I have found is it tends to be moms who recognize the need for an early morning routine. And this would have been true of me as well. It wasn't until I had kids. I mean, we think we're busy before kids. And then you have kids and suddenly you realize your time is no longer your own. And so you have to create time. And as there's only 24 hours in a day, for most of us women as moms, that tends to be before our kids wake up if we want to maintain our sanity, not to mention our health. So my perfect avatar for early morning habit is really busy women. And a familiar business adage is you are best positioned to serve the person you once were. And so for me, that is, think I'm quoting Rory Vaden. He might have been quoting somebody else. I don't even know. But for me, that was the busy Christian mom who wanted to start her day grounded in the truth of God's word and then wanted to pound out a workout. But I knew I needed to start being still because I was constantly surrounded by chaos and noise of society, my own family, the own expectations I put on myself. So busy Christian moms is the very hyper targeted audience, but it's just busy women. Any busy woman benefits from this, whether you're an early morning riser by nature or not, to answer that part.
Okay, perfect. I was going to ask again, but no, perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. So in the two big parts are reading the scripture and getting a workout in. So I've got this friend, he wrote a book about early morning, Hal Elrod. He's got this thing called Savers, and I think that must be like 6 things to do in the morning. Why do you pick those two? And is there anything else that you might think of adding on to it?
It's a great question. And it's an interesting dynamic that a man would create 6 things to do and a woman is going to create 2. And I'll tell you why I think that's an important thing to highlight is one of the issues we frequently face as women is simply that. It's the to-do list. We are constantly exhausted by our to-do lists, and we also feel the pressure in our society, as well as from ourselves, to do more, to hustle harder, and ultimately to be more. We think that we need to prove ourselves and perform to a certain level, whether it be inside our home or outside of our homes, in order to reach a standard of success, however we're defining that. Our family is well put together and our kids are thriving. Maybe that's our definition. Maybe it's financial. Maybe it's the professional goals. But the problem is we are constantly moving. And the reality is, scientifically speaking, socially speaking, all 5 elements of our health, there are ways to prove that one of the best things we can do for ourselves is to actually be still. Practice the art of being still. So when we teach our community how to start their day being, not doing, we are specifically honing in on 3 things. Truth, or God's word, prayer, some people might practice meditation, and then gratitude. And there is a scientifically proven concept called emotionally intelligent gratitude practice. And that is what we teach our community how to implement. Whether you are somebody who prays or doesn't, emotionally intelligent gratitude can change every single aspect of your health and ultimately your life. So Between that and a workout, I want women to be able to create a habit they can sustain. And if you go much beyond 2 things in the morning, I'm already pieced out because I'm looking at my to-do list and I need it simple and sustainable.
I love the simply part. I have a question.
Yeah.
Emotionally intelligent gratitude. In 2018, it was December of 18. I was overstressed, overworked, trying to do too much, and wasn't making all the best choices, wasn't working out enough. And that's where the health journey that you mentioned earlier came. But it was more like a life journey. There was a lot that changed, not snapping at the kids as much. But it started with something called gratitude. Now, I didn't have you in my corner at that time, so I didn't know what emotionally intelligent gratitude was. What I would do is when I'd wake up, I would try to express some gratitude before I got out of bed. When I went to bed, I tried to close my eyes and express some gratitude before I slept. And almost any time that I got overstressed, like things were just compounding on me and I wasn't sure what to do. And I was thinking about how stressful it was. I was thinking about how bad it was. Then I would have to re-hone during the day a few times and just, I guess, talk about my many blessings, because all of us have so many blessings. We just got to think about them, like the relationship with our kids, the relationship with our sweetheart, the air that we have to breathe, the roof over our head, etc. So I would, when it was hardest to feel gratitude in my busiest of times, I would also just take a moment to try to close my eyes or even open them and think about what I'm grateful for. And it ended up making a humongous impact on who I am as a person. And I still try to do it. Not as much, to be honest. I wish I did. I should definitely get back to doing it more often, every morning, every night, and anytime I'm stressed. But I don't know what emotionally intelligent gratitude would mean, if I was even close to it or not. What would you say to a listener who heard that and doesn't know what it means?
Yeah. So I should also clarify, emotionally intelligent gratitude practice is a concept that I have created. So this is proprietary to my program. But why I have clarified something, and I've taken gratitude practice and infused a lot more science into the actual practice. So there's more intention to it. But one of the concerns with gratitude practice that I see for a lot of us is that it starts to border on good vibes only. And anyone who's listened to my podcast knows I am not a fan of that concept. The good vibes only concept is detrimental because what it is subconsciously telling us to do is to keep hustling harder and ignoring the stress, ignoring the fact that we're an absolute mess, ignoring the fact that our family is not perfect, that we actually feel terrible, we're anxious, we're stressed. So good vibes only is almost this concept of just ignore the bad. We're only going to focus on the good. And that's not true for everyone practicing gratitude, but it is very, very easy to start to lean to that corner of gratitude as though it is simply only focusing on the good in our life. Because if we're honest, we are terrified of acknowledging the fact that we're actually a hot mess. Clearly not the corner I stand in, as my podcast is quite literally titled Imperfectly Empowered. I'm all about the concept of embracing the mess. So where we incorporate emotionally intelligent gratitude practice is that in the actual practice of gratitude, before we are even diving into the very specific things that we are grateful for, we are first improving our emotional intelligence. Intellectual intelligence, we're familiar with, IQs. It is something that for the most part cannot be developed. You have a naturally given IQ. Obviously, circumstances can depress somebody's ability to fully live out or up to that IQ potential. But typically speaking, it does not change. Emotional intelligence is something that can be grown, developed, and worked on, and it has 3 components. It is, number 1, being able to identify emotions. And this is where something as simple as an emotions wheel comes in. If you have a kid who struggles with behavioral issues or emotions, I have one of those kids. These emotion wheels come into play because you see like the little happy, do you feel happy? Do you feel sad? Or there's like these wheels that I like that have all kinds of emotions described on them, which is really helpful because half the time we don't even know how to put the words to what we feel. You're like, I don't know, sad. Or it might be more specific than that. So number 1, emotional intelligence includes being able to identify what you're feeling. But number two is being able to communicate what you're feeling, which is an entirely different concept. So number one, being able to identify. Number two, being able to then communicate that, which is called emotional literacy. And then number three, this is truly where gratitude comes into play, being able to convert uncomfortable emotions, the emotions that we try to suppress and ignore and push down, being able to embrace them and then convert them into a positive or more comfortable experience. That is the most difficult part of emotional intelligence, but it is also where gratitude comes in, because what it's saying is basically it's me sitting at the restaurant and feeling really frustrated because my kids have effectively turned the table into a playground. I have 3 children. We're adopting our 4th. So we have 4 children within the ages of 10 to 5. And the restaurant table always very quickly becomes like an obstacle course for salt and pepper shakers and whatever. So it's me sitting at the table feeling very anxious because I still don't have a waitress coming to order my food or bring my food. My kids are frustrating me. I'm already exhausted. And in the moment, an emotionally intelligent person would sit there and recognize, one, I'm feeling frustrated and anxious because my kids are a hot mess in the restaurant and maybe I feel judged. Or maybe I'm just like, why did I even bring my kids out? So I'm recognizing that I'm frustrated and maybe even a little fearful of what people think of me and my family. So maybe anger and fear, 2 primary emotions. Communicating it would be recognizing that I need to not snap at my kids for being kids and needing to get energy out. Also not snapping at the waitress. So communicating with grace. Okay, I'm recognizing that I'm feeling these things. But then third is being able to recognize and embrace those uncomfortable emotions and actually convert them into a positive experience. That would include me looking around and realizing, wow, they're probably significantly understaffed. That waitress to our table has gone to 4 other tables and is probably really behind. And wow, I'm so grateful that that is not my job. And I am really grateful for the fact that I can even sit here and somebody can bring me food as opposed to me having to labor for my food or maybe having no food at all. I'm grateful that my kids are energetic enough to be able to make a mess of this table because they're so well fed. And it's converting what started as an uncomfortable emotion, embracing it, recognizing that you feel it, but then being able to take it with gratitude, flip it, and actually feel thankful and at peace and maybe even happy that I have the blessing and be able to sit here and have food brought to me at some point, whenever that happens.
At some point.
And she probably deserves a tip because she's probably super stressed out. Yeah. So that is just an example of how we use gratitude with that third component of emotional intelligence. And that tool can be used in all areas of life, but we practice it first thing in the morning with what we are most stressed out about in a very strategic way.
Yeah. And why exercise? What does exercise do for us in the morning?
Well, there's, obviously a lot of reasons I probably don't have to expound on why we need to be exercising. But the advantage to pairing these 2 things is being able to take one habit and effectively improve all 5 dimensions of our health. So as a medical provider, this is not something we ever learn in traditional medical education, but I came to realize very quickly that unfortunately in our quote unquote healthcare, it's really more disease care in our country. And it primarily focuses on 1, maybe 1.5 dimensions of our health, which is physical with a little bit of mental sprinkled in. But the reality is we are 5-dimensional creatures and we experience health across 5 spectrums, which is emotional, mental, physical, social, and spiritual. So if we did not include exercise as part of this early morning habit, we're pretty much now doing the opposite and leaving out a massive element of our health, which is physical. And we know when we're exercising consistently, we are also improving all of those other areas of our health for multiple reasons. But the number one reason why it is beneficial for women to get their workout done before the sun or get it done before your kids get up is because we do not realize how much energy, emotional and mental energy it consumes from us during the day. And I'll use myself for an example. The amount of energy, hours even, that I wasted over the years hyping myself up to get the workout done was exorbitant. And I know I'm not the only one. Like, I'm not the only one that pulled up to the gym and sat there in the car for 20 minutes just trying to talk myself to go in and get the thing done. Then when you finally get into the doors, then you stand there and you look at everyone and you feel a little overwhelmed. You see the dude pumping iron over here and you kind of want to use the machine over there, but you don't feel like being right beside the dude pumping like 3 times as much as you could ever do. Or maybe you're intimidated by the woman who's pumping 3 times as much as you could ever do. And so you kind of already feel depressed even walking in the doors. And so you stand there in the bathroom maybe for another 10 minutes figuring out, do I really want to do this or just want to go back to my car? Maybe you never get out of the car and you just turn back around. But even before you got there, maybe you stood in your house and you had to talk yourself to put on the workout clothes. I mean, I don't think I'm the only one that has done this. And then even I work out from home and there would be hours where I would just talk myself into getting the workout done because it's just hanging over you. When you create a strategic habit of getting it done, there's this quote that is laughable, and yet it is so true, that you need to work out in the morning before your mind catches up to what you're doing. Meaning you just want to get it done before your mind has any time to even contemplate all the other things that you need to do or that you'd rather get done. When you do that, there is this whole new set of possibilities that open up during the day because all that mental and emotional energy you put into just hyping yourself up to get the thing done is now taken off your plate. There's a sense of confidence and freedom and empowerment that comes with it because you have just gotten it done, checked off right before your mind even realizes what you're about to do. So that is the number one reason to get it done before the chaos of your day descends. And that takes practice. Took me 2 years. And I'm a very disciplined person, so.
I like that. I was talking to a coacher. That's a weird way to call it. My coach. It kind
of should be a word.
I was talking to my coach.
I'm a coacher.
I was talking to my coach, and he was following the health journey that you mentioned on my social media. And he was like, how do you work out so often or enough? How do you keep it going? How do you stay in the habit? And I have gone through a lot of what you went through. Like, you're not sure if you want to leave the house, where that 15-minute drive to the gym turns into a 30-minute drive because you also have to come back. Plus it's parking. Plus it's, you're going to be there for maybe 30 minutes. You might be there for an hour. You might be there for 2 hours. And so it gets like, well, I'm not sure if now is a good time. And you kind of like keep pushing it off until you haven't done it. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned to him, I said, I just tell myself I work out every day. I just work out every day. I do something. I go on a walk. I do 10 push-ups. It doesn't always have to be 2 hours in the gym. And so I'm curious with what you're doing. You're really talking about simplifying the to-do list, focusing on the 2 things, the Word of God, and also exercise in the morning. And we're also talking about like building it into a daily habit. Like you're mentioning that this should happen every single day. And as I think about it and I was listening to you, it makes me wonder what you advocate for. Should this be a 2-hour workout at home or at the gym? Should it be kind of like I told my coacher, should it be kind of like that where it's like, hey, you just do it a little bit each day, even if it's just 10 push-ups? Where would you say for the listener, if we're not in that habit right now, and we are going to get into podcasting, more podcasting stuff, this is about that transition area. What would you say to a listener who's thinking that maybe they're overwhelmed because of that 15 minutes or the talking themselves out of it? What would you say if we're trying to make it a habit in the beginning?
Yeah, it's such a great question because this is a very real issue and a relatable one for so many of us. First of all, some is always better than none when it comes to movement. Some is better than none. We live in an era, especially with social media, depending on your age and if you gravitate towards a social media platform, it is so easy to just see the highlight reels of fitness. And especially for women, fitness has been made to look pretty. The greatest number, like fitness influencers that have a couple million followers, they're probably lovely women. But the fact is they are making it look like it's beautiful. They look perfect. They've got the power pony, the hero hair, the beautifully matching outfit. They look really, really pretty working out. And so whether we realize it or not, we allow that to affect our mindset when it comes to fitness. just this concept of it needs to be like all or nothing. We need to look really good doing it. We need to be able to be lifting heavy weights. We need to be able to do it an hour a day. And then if I don't do it an hour a day, I feel like crap. And so I'll do it 2 hours the next day. And so we're at risk of, especially as women, men too. I think the struggle is a little different for men, but for women, we really tend to then make it an all or nothing experience and feel very insecure about ourselves. And we know we'll never look like that. And so why even bother? So number one, some is always better than none. And we want to try to change the narrative around why we are pursuing health and why we are working out. And it's, again, bringing the sense of freedom to women that we need to make imperfection perfectly beautiful once again, and mistakes as part of our unmistakable uniqueness. And that includes something as simple as fitness. You might get up with the intention of getting that 30-minute workout done and get 5 minutes of movement in. And you know what? We're going to celebrate it. It's progress. It's not nothing. You got something done. We're going to count that as a win. The end goal, scientifically speaking, per the American Heart Association, we want to pursue 30 minutes of moderate to high intensity exercise 5 days a week. This is science. We're not going on social influence. We are going on science, and scientific evidence says that is enough. That has to be paired with the right nutrition, everything else. But when it comes to remodeling our bodies and quite literally remodeling our heart to prevent cardiac disease, heart issues, brain issues, artery issues, all of the above, we need 30 minutes of moderate to high intensity exercise. So the end goal for our program is we build up movement. So that initial 6-week course, we are slowly introducing morning movement. Even if you've been working out 30 minutes a day for 30 years, it is a lot different doing it at 6 a.m. if you're not a morning person. So we build up to that, with the end goal being that Monday through Friday, you treat exercise like a job. You are investing in yourself, just like you would invest in your family or your profession. You are investing in your own health. And Monday through Friday, you are getting an effective 30-minute workout done before your kids get up or before the sun, whether that means before you leave for your profession or whatever. And we're very strategic in how that looks. But some is better than none is always the end of the day message.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a quick break. And when we get back, I want to talk about why did you launch a podcast, what you think makes a successful podcast, and how does your podcast build your business? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. We'll be right back. Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, GrowYourShow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that, like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show. We're back with Ahna Fulmer, and we're talking about her podcast, Imperfectly Empowered. And we're talking about embracing anything that basically we're not perfect, and we should embrace that. And Amen. She's given us a lot of tips on morning routine, exercise, how much to exercise, the science behind it, and as well, gratitude. And all of that is beneficial for you, regardless if you're a man, a woman, old, young, black, white, it doesn't matter. Like this stuff, a business owner, or you work for somebody, all of these things are important to each one of us. We really should focus on them. I've got 3 questions queued up that I really want to dive into. Ahna, these don't have to be long, but powerful would be great. Powerful would be great. Perfectly empowered. All right. Imperfectly empowered. Here we go. The first one is, why did you launch your podcast? And I really want to hear the why behind the why. Like, what got you to decide that you ought to have that ultimately?
Yeah. So when I started the podcast in the business journey that I've kind of shared, from being an ER nurse practitioner all the way to now creating and launching my own health and fitness program, virtual health and fitness program, I started my podcast sort of in the middle of this journey. So it would have been in 2022, I think January 2022, feels so much longer. And part of it was because in this business journey, it was sort of a personal revelation as well, experience. I have been working with a company called Brand Builders Group. They're amazing. They're a personal brand strategist company, and they're all about personal brands. And the first part of the work that I had to do for my business was really figuring out what is my heartbeat and what makes me unique. What are ways that I've been uniquely gifted to serve others? And part of that process was identifying that communication and connection are two of my strengths. And as part of Coacher, as Adam would say, one of the things that they encouraged was, okay, then how can you use those gifts? And so it was very quickly determined that podcasting would be a good option. And interestingly, it combined a skill that I didn't realize I'd been honing for 10 years, which was interviewing. As an emergency medicine nurse practitioner, I was interviewing people for a living. And an interesting element of interviewing, as well as podcasting, this goes into the next question, but what makes a successful one? And it is learning the art of asking better questions. And I was doing that for years, quite literally saving lives based on how good my questions were. So anyway, it was just sort of an interesting combination of all my experience and skills working with people, asking good questions. And podcasting just felt like a very natural next step. Although I will say, to be clear, I did not have a really clarified message what my podcast was going to be focused in on. And so that's not necessarily how I'd recommend everybody start, but I didn't have a clear sense of where my business was going yet. I just knew podcasting was the next best step for me. So when I first started Imperfectly Empowered, the message was ultimately, we're listening to people with authentic stories and expert advice, inspiring others with expert stories and authentic stories and expert advice. Now we're more niche down, but that's where it started and why.
I think we might need to get there. So you also mentioned what makes the successful podcast. Remind us, what do you say makes truly successful show?
I think first and foremost, you have to make sure that you are clarifying at some point in the journey, ultimately, what is your definition of success for the podcast? I think at some point that needs to be clarified, because if you want podcasting to be your primary business model, then there are certain indicators of success that you need to clearly set as checkpoints. Like, we need to meet these indicators. So if that is your primary business model, then you need to make sure that you are ranking, that you're getting globally rated because you want that authority. And you want to make sure that you are really clearly niching down your target market, because if podcasting is your primary business model, then the best way to make money off of that is going to be sponsorships. And sponsors want to make sure you have perfect alignment with your target market, which means you need to be able to clarify very quickly, who am I targeting and what is the very specific way that I am serving them? So maybe it's business marketing, maybe it is nutrition specifically, maybe it is adoptive parents. So I think number one, you need to clarify what is your end goal for your podcast. In my case, I did quickly figure out that I did not want podcasting to be my primary business model. For me, my primary business model launching in January is the service that I offer, the Evergreen Course and Community on the virtual Early Morning Habit app. So for me, then the podcast, what is sort of terming success when it comes to my end goal for it, is ultimately seeing the Early Morning Habit getting traffic from my podcast.
Okay.
So that's kind of tying in the question. I keep leading into your next question, but how I use that to build business. But if we're generally speaking, what makes a successful podcast, I think it includes everything from making sure it is really, really easy for your guests to be a guest on the podcast. That was really wordy, but it's very significant, because there are podcasts that, frankly, it's a little difficult to be a guest. It's hard to figure out what paperwork you're filling out. The actual process is a little ambiguous, and it's not easy to leave a review. I also make it super, super easy. The majority of my reviews are probably from guests. And that's partly because I have made it really, really easy for them to leave a review. And I remind them multiple times via email when I'm preparing them, hey, your podcast is going to be produced on this day. There's always, if you haven't left a review yet, please review it here. And there's a hyperlinked. That makes it really easy. and then doing giveaways for my listeners to leave reviews. Sometimes it's just personally reaching out to somebody that I know really appreciated a specific episode and just saying, hey, thank you so much for that feedback. Would you be willing to just mention that in a review? People are generally very generous and will do it. So that's one of the more tangible secrets to success is it's really all about the ratings and reviews. And that requires connection. Frankly, it just requires connection with your guests and your listeners. And oftentimes it takes reach out.
I was in Hawaii this week. I came home last night.
Oh, we'll just drop that bomb right here.
No. Here's the thing.
Lucky
I went with one of my clients. He's also a friend. He's been a friend. And I went with somebody else who listens to my podcast.
Where in Hawaii did you go?
Maui.
You went
right after the fires. Right after the fires. Wow. No, I can't say that I was doing any good in that way, but I was spending money, and they do need tourist dollars right now as well. So in a way I was helping Maui, but not like doing relief or supporting the fire in that way. But it was interesting. The guy who listens to my podcast was telling me how great he loves the podcast. Yeah. And then the guy who is a client, who's been a friend for even before he was a client, he was mentioning how easy it is to work with my team. And I didn't consider either of those times to do what you just said. And the quote is, "Thanks for the feedback. Would you be willing to just mention that in a review?" And so I just lost 2 opportunities this week. One from a listener and one from a client to be able to get a review on my podcast for one of them and to get a testimonial for the business from the other person. But both of them are sitting there saying good things about whatever. And I totally missed that opportunity. So I want the listener not to miss that opportunity when somebody comes and tells you, use what Ahna was talking about today. Thank you for the feedback. Would you be willing to share that in a review, in a testimonial?
And then make it very easy for them. This is the thing. Most people are very generous and they're willing to do it, but you need to make it so easy for them to do. Meaning, I will typically just text the person the direct Apple link to my podcast and just say, hey, thanks for that feedback that you mentioned about the podcast. Would you just be willing to leave it in a review here? And I'm texting them the link, because if it's me, I'm happy to do it. But you, girl, you got to make it easy for me to do, because I've got, as we've said, a lot else on my plate. I'm happy to do it. Make it easy for me to do. And I'm happy to write that. So that's kind of how I approach it. And I don't hound them either, to be clear. It's not like I'm repeating the text message over and over, but just make it easy for people.
Yeah. The fact that you text it to the person, that's what I need. When somebody comes to me and they ask me to do something, it's so much easier if they text the thing, especially if it's a link. That way I don't have to look for it. I don't have to find it. Yeah. DM it, text me, because I know that I can get to it. I'm like, all right, perfect. As soon as I see that message from you and I'm sitting down, now I know that I've got everything in place. I don't have to feel stressed about, what was that app, or how do I find their podcast, or anything like that. So
what was the name of that podcast again?
Yeah, exactly.
I know I liked it. I just don't remember the name of it.
Imperfectly Empowered. Duh.
Yeah, that's right. Not perfect. Imperfect.
And so you started to mention how to build a business, how you build your business, how your podcast supports your business. Would you share a little bit about how we're thinking about like our avatar, how we are giving them value, and how do we ultimately start working with them? In what's kind of that vision for somebody who's brand new or might not even have your same business model?
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to the earlier question. You need to be really clear for yourself. What is the goal of your podcast? There needs to be an end goal. Maybe I spoke on podcasting at a conference, and one of the things that I said is maybe you just need a creative outlet. For me, it was blogging initially. Maybe for you, it's podcasting, and you just want to start a podcast on movie reviews because you're a movie fanatic and you just need something fun. Maybe that is the end goal, and that is perfectly acceptable. You just want to have that creative outlet. So there's that. Then if we look at it from a business standpoint, you need to decide, is this your primary business model? If so, you need to go for sponsorships. That's going to be your biggest moneymaker on podcasting, which means you need to niche down your audience. And then if it's a secondary business model like mine, you need to figure out how can you use podcasting to maximize your time. So I always say time is a much more valuable commodity than money. You can always make more money. You cannot make more time. All of us as humans get a set allotment of time a day that is 24 hours. So I value time more than I do money. And so I'm always strategically looking at when I make business moves, even if it takes me more time to make the money down the road, I will try to figure out how to set something up so that I'm ultimately in the end making more money for the time put in. Passive revenue for a more general term. But when it comes to podcasting, the question is, if it's not your primary business model, how can you incorporate what you are already doing by either adding a podcast or taking your podcast and using what you're already doing for your business and putting it on your podcast so that you are maximizing that time? So for example, with Early Morning Habit, something that I am doing, there's obvious things like you market your service on your podcast ad space. That's easy enough. Like you make more money probably having someone sign up for the service that you offer or the product that you sell than you would the measly ad payment that you might get from whatever goes on to your podcast. So market your service. That's an easy one. And then obviously have people that align with your service so that you can organically say, yes, in my program, we do. So it's an organic thing to include in your interviews. But for example, what I'm doing, I am creating a course in a community. It will be a live community, but I am going for the community approach as opposed to the coaching. My program is looking to serve the masses. So I am keeping a lower dollar that serves many as opposed to a higher dollar offer that serves a few. So because of that, I cannot offer a lot of one-on-one coaching, which is what I had been doing for some time through the nutrition and fitness program that I was coaching for. So to be clear, this is like a mass model, which means it needs to be evergreen and community-based instead of coaching-based. But then you need incentives. So you have that initial 6-week course. And as we all know, anyone who's trying to build a community, you have to have ongoing incentives to get people to keep paying you monthly. So what are you offering them that isn't also requiring tons and tons of your time? So in our community, what we are going to be doing in Early Morning Habit, it includes everything from health, fitness, family, and fashion. We've also partnered with some fashion moguls who are giving their professional hair, clothing, and makeup tutorials because we want to empower busy women to get ready in the morning, beautify on the fly, and not live in their yoga pants all day.
Hold up. We should advocate that they do hang in their yoga pants all day.
We do not want them hanging out in their yoga pants all day.
Right. Whatever.
Yep. You can take your yoga pants off, Adam. Get ready for the day.
Oh, that's not me. That's what the guys like what the girls are wearing. All the guys listening are like, no, keep them in their yoga pants. We want that.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, boys, the women staying in their yoga pants, there's probably a lot of other reasons they're staying in those yoga pants because they don't feel confident enough to dress up for the day or they're too exhausted and yoga pants are easier. So I hear what you're saying, but we women, we need to prioritize ourselves. Sometimes that requires getting out of the yoga pants. But the point being, basically, so fashion is, you're like, why is fashion in there? That's why fashion would be an appropriate person to come in. So what we're going to do in our community is we're going to have a monthly guest expert live interview within the community. So what we'll do is we'll have a Zoom meeting and the guest expert will come in. I'm going to actually interview him or her, probably her, like a podcast style. So from the very beginning, I'm going to be saying, hey, like, welcome to the Early Morning Habit community. People will be there live. They'll all be muted, but she and I will be live. And then it will conduct itself similarly to a podcast interview. The guest will have the opportunity to engage with my community live over Zoom, and they'll have the chance to ask questions. So I'll conduct the initial interview, and then towards the end, there's going to be community Q&A. That'll be obviously moderated by myself and my team, and then a giveaway. The interview, however, the audio and the video is going to be uploaded as a podcast once a month to Imperfectly Empowered, which will be in line with the Early Morning Habit community. The advantage, though, for being in the paying community is that, one, if you show up live, you are automatically entered to win the giveaway that is either donated by the guest, and then we're going to reimburse shipping costs for when they send it to the recipient, or it'll be a giveaway hosted by us if the expert guest does not have something they want to give away. And then, of course, they get to ask live questions. But what I'm doing here is I'm taking what I'm already planning on doing for my community, my paying community, my primary business model, and I'm figuring out a way to layer or stack that content to other areas of my business. It's ultimately marketing. So for me, my podcast has become more of a marketing and exposure platform for my primary business model. The follow-up to that is we will then take the adoptive moms who are raising funds through our program, An Early Morning Habit, and we will interview them on the podcast. The goal is to have one a month where not only are we hearing their story and we're increasing awareness for adoption, but then they will also share as part of that interview testimony to how Early Morning Habit has made a difference, not just in their own life, but financially overcoming the burden of adoption, how much money they have been able to raise through the program, etc. So again, it's figuring out what are you already doing? How can you layer that onto your podcast or vice versa? How can you take what you're already doing on your podcast and benefit your paying community or the community you want to build? So right there is 50% of my monthly podcast that I'm already wanting to do for my primary business model.
So quick question, and I'm liking how you're taking what you're already doing and adding it to everything. The part that I'm confused about, and maybe the listener is feeling that as well, is that you mentioned that you're recording once a month, you're doing an interview and also having the live Q&A. And you're saying that you're doing it, quote, similar to a podcast. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what I'm wondering is, you mentioned that it's once a month that's going to go up to your community as a podcast, but does it go on your actual podcast, or does it not go on your podcast?
Yes,
your free
it will
one.
Also go, you mean like on the audio podcast?
Yeah.
Yes, it will actually go on the audio podcast. So I've done a couple group interviews on the podcast so far. So the biggest one that we had, I think, was 10 of us. Because obviously the question is always audio. When you have like a big group, how do you control audio? Because we all know certainly podcast listeners are very picky about the audio. So I have not done a group bigger than 10. That is certainly something that we will have to figure out, how we keep the audio really controlled when we do live Q&A. But from the group ones that I have done, the audio has actually turned out very well on the back end. That was partly because I was controlling the dynamic, meaning I would lead the person before they spoke. So in our group of 10, I would say, yeah, Ben, go ahead. And I would unmute him. So I was also controlling it, but it will go on audio. Logistically, we'll have to make sure we have a good plan in place to make sure the audio is controlled when you're doing a group like that. But it actually tends to be, if you can do it, it's really enjoyable to listen to because you have that group feeling where it's like, oh, it's like a bunch of people involved there. Yeah.
Cool. The link to Imperfectly Empowered, the podcast with Ahna Fulmer, is in the show notes. The link to your website's in the show notes, and the social media that you wanted to share is also down there as well. So if you're listening, you can connect with Ahna. You can find more about her. You can check out her community and her coaching. So just scroll down, everything's there. And then we're going to jump off, but the next episode's a pretty short episode. It's a solo episode that I took a little bit of time just to pour into you individually. So you don't even have to go anywhere. You can check out that short episode. I'll see you there.
By the way, one way to ensure that you don't miss out on great content that we're producing on a regular basis is to make sure you're subscribed to the show. You need to be subscribed or following the Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to it in order not to miss all of that. And before I let you go, I need to mention, because a lot of people are asking, do you help? Can you help me with this? And the answer is yes. My company actually does it. It's called Grow Your Show. And you can find that at growyourshow.com. Our clients, they call us the easy button for podcaster because they simply have to record their episode. And they know that every single thing else is done for them. We sweat the hard stuff so you can be the star of your show. And if you would like help to make sure that we're editing and publishing and promoting and doing your social media, it's all in one place. And I think it's pretty affordable. You'll have to take a look for yourself. Just go to growyourshow.com and check us out. And by the way, I'll see you on the next episode.